The honourable member for Regina Lewvan.
Mr. Speaker, the federal government has provided tens of millions of dollars to the Global Transportation Hub near Regina. But now, this Crown Corporation is mired in a controversial land deal that saw it pay more than twice what the land was worth to sellers with connections to the governing Sask party. There have been calls for an RCMP investigation. Will the Government of Canada undertake its own investigation to ensure that no federal funds were wasted in this suspicious Sask party deal?
The Minister of Infrastructure and Communities.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The decisions made by the local governments are decisions made by the local governments. Our role as a federal government is support local decision-making. That's why, Mr. Speaker, we have committed $60 billion of new money to support community-based infrastructure based on the decision made by the local government.
Regina Lewvan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On February 16th, I asked about the scandal engulfing Saskatchewan's Global Transportation Hub. In responding, the Minister of Infrastructure deferred to local decision-making. I believe that he may not have been fully aware of the gravity of this scandal. The Global Transportation Hub is a provincial Crown corporation that operates a logistics facility just west of Regina. It has received millions of dollars in federal funding. On February 26, 2013, an Alberta businessman, Robert Tapoff, bought 2 parcels of land that the Provincial Ministry of Highways would need to build a bypass near the Global Transportation Hub. He paid $45,000 and $55,000 per acre for the 2 parcels. Later that same day, Tapoff sold these parcels for $71,000 and $84,000 per acre, turning a profit of $6 million. Anthony Marquardt, the Regina developer who bought the land from Tapoff, sold it 1 year later to the Global Transportation Hub for $103,000 per acre, turning a profit of $5 million. The next month, the Global Transportation Hub sold most of the land back to the Ministry of Highways for between $50,000 and $65,000 per acre, very close to the price originally paid by Tapoff. Appraisers, lawyers, and other experts are asking why the Global Transportation Hub bought the land for about twice what it was worth, only to sell it back for half the price to the Ministry of Highways, which could have expropriated the land in any case. How did Tapoff and Marquardt anticipate that the Global Transportation Hub would overpay for this land? Well, it turns out that both of these businessmen donated thousands of dollars to the governing Saskatchewan party. Tapoff also leases 2,000 acres of farmland to Bill Boyd, the provincial cabinet minister directly responsible for the Global Transportation Hub. Are we to believe that no information was exchanged between Boyd and Tapoff? Are we to believe that all of this was simply coincidental? This scandal should be of great concern to this House because the federal government has provided millions of dollars to the Global Transportation Hub. Presumably, the goal was to invest this money in improving local infrastructure, not to create a slush fund for Sask party cabinet ministers to transfer to their cronies through suspicious land deals. There is more than enough evidence in the public domain to warrant a federal investigation to safeguard federal tax dollars. There is more than enough evidence to warrant an RCMP investigation. No one blames the Government of Canada for this scandal. However, the people of Saskatchewan, and indeed all Canadians, need specific assurances that the federal government will not turn a blind eye to this situation. We need to know that the federal government takes this scandal seriously and will take action to get to the bottom of it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for his question. At the outset, allow me to clarify an important point. The Government of Canada is providing funding of up to $27 million to the province of Saskatchewan for transportation infrastructure required to support the development of the Global Transportation Hub, a transportation and logistics centre in West Regina. This funding is provided under the Gateways and Borders Crossing Fund and is strictly dedicated to support transportation infrastructure. The Government of Canada has no role in the development of the intermodal and logistic centre itself, and none of the $27 million federal contribution is intended to fund the acquisition of land required for either the intermodal centre or for the associated transportation infrastructure funded under the Gateways and Border Crossings Fund. The focus of the Gateways and Border Crossings Fund is on nationally significant transportation projects, such as this one, that support international trade and efficient and integrated supply chains. This program aims at developing and exploiting Canada's strategic gateways, trade corridors and border crossings, including better integration of the national transportation system. Funding of up to 50% of the total eligible costs of the project, up to $27 million in federal contribution funds, has been committed to the province of Saskatchewan to support the associated transportation infrastructure required to facilitate the movement of goods and people as a result of the development of the Global Transportation Hub on the west side of the city of Regina. The Global Transportation Hub includes Canadian Pacific Railway's new expanded intermodal facility and Loblaw Companies Limited's new Western Canadian Distribution Centre. The transportation infrastructure components of the Global Transportation Hub project, funded under the Gateways and Border Crossing Fund, include significant improvements to intermodal access roads and construction of a short section of the West Regina bypass. It will address immediate transportation capacity issues, increase safety, while strategically building the related road infrastructure to support expanded international trade movements. These improvements will greatly increase the productivity of the supply chain across Western Canada to the Asia-Pacific region. Under the Gateways and Borders Crossing Fund, and consistent with similar federal infrastructure transportation funding programs, costs associated with land acquisition are ineligible for federal reimbursement. These ineligible costs are therefore the sole responsibility of the province of Saskatchewan. The Government of Canada is committed to working with our provincial partners to improve transportation infrastructure and promote long-term economic growth for Canadians. We are pleased to have invested in this important project that directly supports trade flows interprovincially and internationally. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Regina Lewvan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would thank the Parliamentary Secretary for providing us with a bit of an overview of the Global Transportation Hub and of federal infrastructure programs. Now, the answer to my question seems to be that the federal funding was not intended to be used for land acquisition. But what we're dealing with in this case, Mr. Speaker, is a situation where clearly rules were broken, where clearly proper procedures were not followed. So I'm wondering if the Government of Canada would be prepared to conduct an investigation to ensure that no federal funds were spent on land acquisition. Again, here we have a situation where it's obvious that impropriety may well have occurred. So it's not good enough to suggest that the rules would have made these type of expenditures ineligible. I think it's important for the federal government and quite possibly the RCMP to investigate to make sure that these funds were not used for land acquisition. Thank you.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Government of Canada is not involved in funding the Provincial Crown Corporation, known as the Global Transportation Hub in Regina, or its associated land transactions. The government's involvement in the Global Transportation Hub has been solely focused on financing the associated transportation infrastructure under the Gateways and Border Crossing Fund. The Government of Canada has signed a contribution agreement with the province of Saskatchewan to contribute up to $27 million to strictly support transportation infrastructure that will greatly improve the flow of goods and enhance the integration of the national transportation system. None of the $27 million in federal funding has been allocated to purchase lands. Land acquisition costs are ineligible under the Gateways and Border Crossings Fund program and are the sole responsibility of the province of Saskatchewan. Federal contribution funds are strictly monitored to ensure the funds are spent for the right purpose. Financial audits are regularly conducted to support this due diligence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci beaucoup. L'honorable député de...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've had some broad questions about the overall fiscal framework. I'd like to focus on a couple of specific areas. As the Treasury Board is undoubtedly aware, the Global Transportation Hub near Regina is mired in a controversial land deal that saw this Crown Corporation pay more than twice what the land was worth to sellers with connections to the governing Sask Party. There have been calls for an RCMP investigation. In Monday's adjournment debate, the Parliamentary Secretary for Transport confirmed that her department had provided $27 million to the Global Transportation Hub, but did not seem particularly concerned about how the money was spent. Today's Globe and Mail reports that the Treasury Board has placed Transport Canada under special oversight. Will that include an investigation to ensure that federal tax dollars were not wasted in a suspicious Sask Party land deal?
Thank you very much, Mr. Weir. And you've actually worked at Treasury Board at one point or another.
That's true.
I think Mr. Blaney actually worked at Public Works, my old department, a long time ago. But in terms of first of all, I want to address broadly the issue around Transport Canada's operating budget on this. We're working closely with Minister Garneau on this, and he will respond to specific transport questions around that. I'm certainly willing to speak with Minister Garneau about that. Treasury Board is engaged across every government department and agency. We work closely, our Controller General, Mr. Matthews particularly, like me, a Dalhousie University graduate with a commerce degree from Dalhousie, just like, so it must be a smart fellow. But we work closely with departments and agencies with the objective of establishing strong financial governance. And we work including identifying if there are issues, and so we will. Would it be all right if I were to check into that and work with my colleague minister and get back to you?
I would certainly appreciate that. So just to clarify, you'll ask Minister Garneau to look specifically into the Global Transportation Hub, just to make sure that federal funds were not misspent.
I've been around long enough to know when I don't know the answer to a question, I say I don't know the answer to the question. I will talk with Minister Garneau about that, and I commit to you, and we'll get back. The last thing I want to get drawn into is provincial politics in Saskatchewan, so I don't know what the situation is there, but from a federal government's perspective, we'll certainly check into that.